Well, yeah, I was thinking we'd pick on another one of my favorite adaptogenic components in our wonderful Soulera. And that particular one that I've had a fascination for, gosh, more years than I want to admit to, Rob, is called Rhodiola Rosea. Many people that have been involved in natural health care have probably seen a variety of formulations with this plant. It's actually in the sedum family known as sedum rosum, and many people are familiar with sedums because they are very common ground covers in gardens all over the United States, and there's lots of different kinds. This particular one has been known for literally centuries. It's been researched literally for centuries, and it tends to grow in the colder climates of the world, and it likes rocky crevices. When you're out on a hike or something and you see this little plant, or when you look at a path rockway in your own garden and you see these little tiny plants growing through this teeny tiny crack, and you can't even imagine why in the world it could get through there. Well, think rhodiola, because that's its thing. It can literally grow through the tiniest cracks, and it's a unique plant in that the roots are extremely concentrated in the active compounds, and one root of this will stem many, many different stems. Produces a beautiful little flower, sometimes yellow, sometimes white, and it's been found all over North America, the Arctic, Europe, UK, Asia, Siberia, even. And it's been known and originally was harvested and used in traditional medicine cultures back in the days when all we had was herbs, primarily for its ability to relieve stress and stress-induced depression. It literally has this wonderful ability to, even drinking it in the tea form, to calm the system down. And it does it right away. And it has this amazing adaptogenic property. We talked about adapt and adaptogenics last week, about how they help the body adapt to various kinds of stresses, whether that be emotional stress or physical stress, working hot out in the sun, working at high elevations where you're low in oxygen. Adaptogens help your body's chemistry literally adapt and come back to stasis. Now, there is another aspect of adaptogenic compounds that's pretty unique. And one of the things that intrigued me way back when is their ability to have long-lasting effect. We've kind of grown up in a world where we tend to deal with our symptoms chronically. So if we're a person that's inclined, let's say, towards stress headaches, well, you might be hitting the aspirin bottle or something else, 2, 3, 4 times a week, and it does at that moment in time relieve it, but it doesn't have that long-lasting effect. Dare we say the possibility of the word cure? And yet rhodiola has been shown in studies in numerous countries over many, many, many years to have this wonderful effect in helping bringing the body into homeostasis so that effect remains. Not easy to do, and there are not an awful lot of plants out there that have that part of the adaptogenic categorization. Its ability to help us adapt is found in its ability to help us control two of the worst chemicals when they're out of balance that exist in the human body. Corticosteroids, you're all familiar with that. If you have an allergic reaction and you go see your doctor, chances are good he might put you on some kind of a corticosteroid to calm the system down. And the other is catecholamines. Now, these are chemicals that your body naturally produces within our cells to help us when there is a red alert situation. The problem with those two chemicals are that they're hard to shut off once they get going, especially when the stress is more than momentary. Now, most of us are familiar with cortisol because we talked about that last week. It's one of those adrenal hormones that has some very dynamic benefit. You know, if you're getting chased down the path by the bear, you know, it's that cortisol that gives you that second kick. It keeps you going. And but if we are in modern society today where we're less active and we're not literally out there running to the point of exhaustion and burning up that cortisol, that corticosteroid, well, then it tends to build up in our tissues. And we begin to have chronic stress even if we don't have chronic stress. We end up with a chemical chronic stress situation. So when we can take an adaptogenic herb then that has the ability to slow or help regulate certain hormones or corticosteroids and catecholamines in our body, that then helps the rest of the normal balancing chemistry come back. So hormones and steroids are kind of on a balance beam with one another as our neurotransmitters. We have things that pump us up when we need to be pumped up, and we have compounds naturally produced in our body to slow us down when the red alert is over. But these corticosteroids and catecholamines can have a very long, lingering effect, especially if we're experiencing the stress and we're not being very physically active. So rebalancing that then lets the other adrenal hormones and the other neurotransmitters calm down, and we come back into balance. Now, this isn't pie in the sky. This isn't fiction. This isn't an old wives' tale. This compound has been researched since ancient times, and guess what? It's also being researched today. It is such an amazing compound, in fact, that there are many antidepressive compounds sold in the marketplace today that contain Rhodiola Rosea. And they get better results by adding that to those various compounds. You know, when we think about it, adaptogens that have a long-lasting effect on our hormonal system also can have a very long-lasting effect on our metabolic system. Now, that's kind of saying a lot. You know, we think about our metabolism. If we're overweight, that comes up a lot. Well, gee, I've got a slow metabolism. And if you're more the athletic type of person, you probably think about metabolism in a slightly different way, in that we know when our metabolism is upregulated, we literally can improve our circulation of blood and oxygen. When we do that, we have numerous benefits to the body, including cognitive function, memory, and physical and mental performance. Those are not uncommon at all. But here's something that is really fascinating in the whole metabolic arena. And that is, it has been studied for many years for its effect on adipose tissue, i.e. fat. Now, I can tell you that literally in the last 3 to 4 decades, billions of dollars have been spent trying to research compounds that can free up stored fat. Any of you on this call that's ever really fought the battle of the bulge, I don't mean just 3 or 4 or 10 pounds. I mean, if you had 20 or 30 or 40 pounds, if you got to a point in your life where you had enough fat on your body that if you squeezed it, you could see it was lumpy and bumpy underneath, and whatever diet, whatever protocol you tried, in almost every case, you would lose weight to a certain point, and then you would hit the dreaded lurky, the plateau. And getting through that plateau can be extremely difficult. And the reason for that is that the body wants to hang on to some of that stored fat. It doesn't seem to get the picture that we live in 2018, and we need to look our best to feel our best, because there is that psychological effect. There's also the physiological effect that it's a lot easier to get up and clean the car and cut the grass and go to work and get dressed even in the morning when your body is lean and it moves easily. It's a lot harder when you're packing 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 pounds of extra fat. So the fat kind of gets locked. And modern medicine has been looking for enzymes that would go in and help start to break down and release this stored adipose tissue. Well, the interesting thing about rhodiola is in the process of upregulating your metabolism, so you've got better oxygen delivery to your brain and your heart and your muscles and all those critical functions, but it has the ability to actually speed up the amount of fat being metabolized within the fat cell itself. So it's like modern science has been looking and spending and looking and spending for years now to find something that could release that stored adipose tissue, i.e. break it down. And here rhodiola has kind of been under their nose for a long time, and it's only the more recent studies that show how that actually works. Now, in the process of metabolism, if you can upregulate circulation of blood and oxygen, and you can upregulate the fuel you need for all those muscles to go out and do the work or ride the bike or work out at the gym, it's also true that those benefits plus a few more can actually increase the body's energy levels. And this part, this part actually talks to, in particular, the muscles, the nerve cells, and the brain. We don't think about it a lot. Where does our energy come from? We're so used to just having it when we need it. And if we're running a little short, well, what the heck, have a cup of green tea or black tea or a cup of coffee, and voila, we've stimulated the body to upregulate our energy. But what we don't realize about that behavior is what we're doing is we're robbing stored hormone from the endocrine system. Now, when your body, your thyroid, your adrenal, your pituitary, when they produce all these wonderful hormones that help with the regulation of all of the biochemical processes in the human body, when they produce these hormones, a certain amount is held in reserve within that endocrine itself. And that's there for red alert. If something happens and you've got to have reserve and you're 2 hours of sleep in bed and there's a family emergency or whatever, you have that stored hormone ready to go. When we take a stimulant, what we do is we force the release of this backup directing energy. And if you keep doing it too often, pretty soon what's been stored is bye-bye. Now we start to talk about a deeper level of fatigue because we exhaust that emergency reserve, and then you find, well, what 1 cup of coffee used to do, it now takes 3 or 4. The way Rhodiola Rosea works is that it increases the availability of fuel to our muscles, to our nerves, and to our brain, and at the same time it boosts oxygen. So it's very interesting if we study what's been done, especially in Russia, using this to enhance productivity in professional and competitive athletes. My gosh, the research reserves are like almost non-ending. If I live to be 200, I probably can't read every single one of them. It's really amazing. And yet, in that whole principle, because we're tapping stored calories instead of forcing the release of stored hormone, we don't have the crash. Anybody who's ever had to use caffeine or any other kind of a stimulant knows that at some point that's going to wear off, and when it does, you're pretty doggone tired. But when we have adaptogenic formulas that can affect our metabolism, instead of being worn out, we end up continuously having more energy on tap for anything we want to do in our lives. That's pretty significant. If we really just stop and think about it, today, the 3 things, 15 years ago, if you surveyed massive populations in North America and asked people what their primary complaint was, it was weight loss. Today, it's about energy, stamina, sleep, and overall mental function. Those are the four biggest things that are on people's minds today. And if we had nothing but rhodiola, we could deliver assistance with that every single day. Now, when we downregulate stress hormones, the corticosteroids and the catecholamines, it's really important to understand that when these chemicals are released in the body in higher amounts over time, continuously, the body's reduction of other hormones of our systems actually lead to some pretty crazy things. It affects the heart in a very negative way. We have higher blood pressure. It can lead to various types of heart disease. And people are always asking me, well, how can it do that? How can that do? Well, the bottom line is this. When we have elevation of corticosteroids and catecholamines, and we get to the point where it's gone on long enough that those stress hormones are literally raising our blood pressure, we know that medicine has various kinds of blood pressure regulating medications, and one of those is a beta blocker, and that's to down regulate these stress hormones to reduce blood pressure. But the tricky part is this. If you've ever been to your doctor and had a blood test done, and you have chronic elevated potassium and at the same time limited amount of sodium, because these two guys are on a balance beam with one another, when that potassium gets to a dangerous level, it can actually stop your heart. And that can happen when we stay under chronic stress and we don't do things, we don't get on a program, we don't supplement, we don't exercise, we don't giggle, we don't sing a happy tune often enough. Now, additional and newer research has shown that rhodiola can help regulate heartbeat, help balance arrhythmias, as well as reduce atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is one of the number one causes, that plaque that builds up inside of you, one of the number one causes of heart attacks and strokes. Some of the funner stuff that's going on in modern science today is studying this plant for its immune system properties. And it works very, very, very directly on something called NK cells. And if you don't know what an NK cell is, that stands for natural killer cells. So think of all the white blood cells in your body. You've got a big variety of them. I look at them as being privates and sergeants and corporals and generals, man. And the generals are the NK cell, natural killer cells. Those are the dudes that can go after the biggest problems that we have. And there's been a lot of studies with various conditions that are being researched by modern medicine today that show many of us, as we get older in particular, or when we've been under long-term stress, it has an adverse effect, a suppressing effect on the production of NK cells. And yet rhodiola is clearly showing that it can stimulate the production of NK cells in our stomach and our spleen, thereby increasing the number of warriors we have and helping the body to get back to homeostasis. And homeostasis means balance. It means perfect balance. Everybody in there in this town called body knows each other, likes each other. They're all sharing the workload. They're all happy about their part and what they're doing. And probably some of the most recent research is looking kind of exciting in terms of certain compounds in this particular plant having anti-tumoral effects. Now, it's too soon to say that it will ever be included in anything in that range, but the very fact that it has such a phenomenal effect on strengthening our immune system, and that we are seeing early on some encouraging results, means that this particular plant and its multiple compounds is going to continue to be out there on the headlines in the research world for quite some time. The wonderful thing about plants is that unlike vitamin C, which is, maybe got 4 or 5 components, basically bioflavonoids and vitamin C, hopefully in ascorbate form, rutin, hesperidin, those are all really good things. But many of your plants can have as many as 200 or 300 phytochemicals. And their phytochemicals are on the hotbed of research today. Their ability to balance the body and provide these plant-based compounds known as alkaloids. Basically, these are compounds with quite a good bit of nitrogen in them, and most of you would probably know from experience within your own family or circle of friends that alkaloids, some of the more common known alkaloids are things like morphine and quinine. Flavonoids have been a hotbed of research now for about 12 years. And flavonoids include things like quinones, and they're water-soluble anthocyanins. You guys have all heard about anthocyanins if you've been in the natural health research area for any length of time. They are water-soluble. They are smaller antioxidants. They're very powerful. And because they're so tiny, they can get to places easier, and they can get to places that only small, teeny tiny things can get to help. Think of, for example, the capillaries of your brain and your eyes, the small blood vessels, the teeny tiny cells that, although small, are extremely powerful. These kinds of compounds come from the flavonoid family. Quinones, I think everybody kind of knows a little bit about. They've been around for a long time, and they're not being researched near as much as the alkaloids and the flavonoids are currently. Now, the last part about this little discussion for tonight, and I'm trying, Rob, really good to be on time, is that Rhodiola Rosea has been shown and prescribed for a long time in traditional and also modern applications for you guys for erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. And because of its effect in this area, it not only can boost libido, but also fertility. And, you know, the reality is, if we're all adults here on this phone, we all know that many of us are happier and healthier when we have a good, healthy sex life, which has its own range of psychological, emotional, and physical health for all of us. Now, a word of caution is always indicated with some compounds. I don't look forward to seeing any of this in our compound because we're not giving you just rhodiola or certain high concentrations of rhodiola. This guy, Rhodiola, has been around for a long time. He has probably the best track record of just about anything I've ever researched and also used personally and clinically. I'm so excited that I hope the close of this call tonight, Rob is going to tell us the very minute we can all start ordering because I want a lot of this stuff.